It is 7:01. I'm going to call the meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order, and I'm going to ask Selectman Muska to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All members of the Board of Selectmen are here present virtually. I do have an added agenda item. I'd like to add agenda item 9D, discussion of the and a vote on a historic documents preservation grant application.
Make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second, Marie D'Souza.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Charlie voted but was on mute, so if the record would reflect all members were in favor. That'll be added as agenda item 9D. Meeting minutes. Our first meeting minutes are from the regular meeting of December 16th, 2021. Everybody had a chance for...
Oh, sorry. Selectman Muska will move to approve the regular meeting minutes from December 16th, 2021.
Is there a second?
Selectman Nordell will second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Minutes are approved unanimously. Hang on one second. One second, please. I am just, one of our legislators asked me to send a reminder link for the Zoom meeting. They were in the Teams meeting. Next is the regular meeting minutes from January 6th.
Make a motion to accept the regular meeting minutes of January 6, 2022 as presented.
Is there a second?
Selectman Muska will second.
Any discussion or corrections?
I think we lost Alan from the meeting.
All right, let's give him a second to log back in. But just so you folks know, we are having a special town meeting tonight at 7:30 as per charter. So I'm a little hesitant to start the legislative discussion and then interrupt it for the town meeting. So I'm kind of trying to stretch this 30 minutes out a little bit. Oh, here he is. Al.
Hi, sorry about that.
So there's been a motion and a second to adopt the meeting minutes from January 6th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Special meeting minutes from January 13th.
Selectman Muska will move to approve the special meeting minutes from January 13th, 2022.
Marie D'Souza will second it.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Any corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Marie voted on mute, so all members voted affirmative. No members were opposed. Okay, I don't have any, we're going to go on to public participation. So this is one of two opportunities for the public to address the Board of Selectmen on issues that are on the Selectmen's meeting agenda. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? If so, if you would please unmute yourself, identify yourself by name and address, and state your business. Seeing none, there will be another opportunity later in the meeting for the public to address the board. I don't have any communications. We do have a resignation. Betsy Laborious was appointed to the Board of Education, and because of that appointment, she needs to resign from the Housing Authority. So she submitted her letter to me on January 14th, and it was included in your packet. Could I have a motion to accept Betsy's resignation?
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation of Betsy Laborious from the East Windsor Housing Authority with regret, and wish her the best of luck in new endeavors with the Board of Ed.
Is there a second?
Selectman Nordell will second that.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further comments? Sarah?
I'd like to thank Mrs. Laborious for her service in this capacity, but I just have a question for clarification on procedure. I know in the past we've accepted resignations from the Board of Education, and I don't recall Mr. Rabers coming before us. So I don't know if that's just a formality or if that's something that is required of us. If you could just let us know.
So Board of Education, it falls under a little bit of a different protocol than most other boards. You actually resign to the State Board of Education, not to the municipality. And so that's why it didn't formally come to us. Typically, we have done that in the past as just a matter of practice, but it is not a requirement that it come here. So you guys are aware, and this doesn't really fall under this agenda item, but we've had two long-serving members of boards and commissions, and when I mean long-serving, I'm talking like in the decades, who have stepped off recently, and my staff is working on putting together, a commemorative recognition for them. That would be Joe Ouellette from Planning and Zoning and Bill Raber from the Board of Ed. I think both of whom hit the 2-decade mark. So I plan on doing something to commemorate both of their service once we're able to congregate again in person. So that's a long way of saying, Sarah, to your point, that we are going to recognize the service that those folks contributed.
Thank you.
Bill Raver did do a letter of resignation to the Board of Ed's members at the time that he resigned. I read it someplace, but I'm not sure where, but it's out there.
Any further discussion on Betsy's resignation? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion is accepted unanimously. Okay, South Road. So I do have a little bit of an update for you folks, and I wrote it down so I would make sure I hit all the salient points. That's later. That's that. Okay, so there are a couple of steps that we outlined, I think back in September, a Gantt chart of sorts with how the flow of business would go. One of those items that remained unresolved was the sewer lining that needed to be fit along the sewer before the WPCA would take it over. That work was supposed to be done by a company called Green Mountain, and it was supposed to take place the week of November 1st. They did not do that. I do have assurance from them that they will be on scene on January 24th, which is Monday, and that the work should be completed by the end of the week next week. That's on the conveyance question between the WPCA and the town. But there's other work that needs to be done, and progress is being made. I think Al will probably report on this later on, but I'm going to cover some of it now. The subdivision application was reviewed by PZC and approved. They're currently in a notice of decision appeal period, which should expire sometime around February 1st. After that, the subdivision as amended will be filed with the town clerk. Variance certificates for each property will be filed, and the Board of Selectmen will need to do an 824 referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission because it is disposition of public property. And ultimately, after the 824 referral, we're going to have to send that to a town meeting. But before we get to a town meeting, I am going to want to have another meeting with the residents to explain where things stand, what the implications for them will be in terms of increased equity, certain encumbrances and so forth, and answer any questions that they have. The process may get a little bit more complicated if not all of the property owners are interested in taking ownership of the underlying property, but I want to give them an opportunity to learn about what it really means for them before we go forward with the disposition. I don't want to stick them with something they're not fully briefed on. So that's kind of where that stands. We are still moving along at a good pace. I'm hoping that the sewer work will be done next week as planned, and then we'll take the other steps as they come. But we're still a number of weeks away from being able to get to a conveyance. Any questions or comments on South Road? Okay. We're going to go on. I'd ask that we postpone agenda item 9B, a discussion of the 2022 legislative session with our legislative delegation until after the town meeting.
Selectman Nordell, so moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay. We're going to go on to tax refunds. Oh, yeah, no, tax refunds is not.
Nancy Jr. is listening. Connor Hughes here.
Oh, you know what? I missed an item. My apologies. I missed 9A, which is a discussion of the Stiles Bridge detour. This probably could have gone under communication, but I left it as a standalone item anyway. So as you folks will remember, Senator Anwar and Representative Foster worked with the Broadbrook Fire Department, the Warehouse Point Fire Department, and I to encourage DOT to take action on the deteriorating nature of the Stiles Bridge. It had previously been impassable for emergency vehicles for a number of years. It was deemed unsafe as long ago as 2010. And we got DOT, actually, I got to say, Commissioner Giulietti was very helpful. They agreed to do a patchwork fix, which happened last year, that would allow for the bridge to be usable for emergency vehicles, at least responding to a scene, maybe not necessarily returning from a scene, but certainly getting to a scene. It's now passable. That's a short-term patch, and the bridge is scheduled to be replaced in total in 2023, so next year. And so DOT provided an update with what the detour routes were going to be. Notably, they're going to have to dead end Mahoney Road at the intersection of Mahoney and Scantic, and Old Ellington Road at the intersection of Old Ellington and Mill Street. Construction again is going to start in 2023. All driveways will still be accessible. So if you live on one of those dead ended areas, you're still going to have access to your home. We'll be able to get you in and out. And they provided, actually, I thought this was from somebody from away who did this, but they provided an 11-mile detour using only state roads. That's going to be true of anybody who's not from here, but just looking at the map that they outlaid, anybody who's from town is going to find the much easier ways to get around than what DOT laid out. However, I do appreciate that they kept the detour only on state roads, so that's going to be theirs to manage and mitigate. So it's moving forward. That's I'm impressed. DOT is doing a good job.
Do you think that proposed detour is going to create any truck traffic? Because right now they're kind of deterred from not going down Scannick Road to that bridge. I'm just not sure if this is not going to open that up come 2023.
come 2023 after the bridge is replaced, or while
No,
the
before.
It should not,
Before.
because the bridge is not, truck traffic shouldn't be using that bridge now anyway.
Right.
So it shouldn't alter truck traffic because they should already be detoured. Whether that's the practice or not, I guess remains to be seen, but DOT will be on site to manage that, or whoever they sub out the work to.
Right.
And the detour that they outlaid will take them along routes that are appropriate for heavy truck traffic.
Okay, thanks.
What happens afterwards,
Yeah.
I'm curious about that, but Charlie, you had a question?
Selectman Nordell, I could be wrong about this, and I believe both fire chiefs are on currently. They could confirm or deny this, but where they have Mill Street's approximate closure and Scannick Road's approximate closure could prevent emergency vehicles from actually getting to certain scenes quicker. I think that coming down Scannick Road and getting to the end of Mahoney Road at some time, certain times of day, based on when we have personnel in certain firehouses, is actually a quicker route to get to the end of Mahoney Road than going around. I'm not sure that's the case on the Broadbrook side, but if they were to close Scandic way up there by Sabonis Landing, it prevents them from getting to like the group home at the end of Mahoney Road from Scantic. And whether they plan on having construction equipment just parked on the street, I don't know, but
They
that
do.
might be something to look into, that they might have to refer to fire safety and ambulance safety, just as a question.
I think they're using the water company's property to stage, including equipment and material. So I think that's why they're dead ending it there. I'm happy to send them a letter if you want.
Yeah, I just, I think maybe emergency services should be consulted on that.
Well, they were
Okay.
they were CC'd on the well, first of all, they were on the call, and then they were CC'd, all of them. Warehouse Point Fire, Broadbrook Fire, EMS, Police, Fire Marshal, DPW. It's an extensive CC list.
Mhm.
I'm thinking that they probably thought that out, and it's pretty close. The bridge abutment and the work that's going to have to be done is pretty close to the end of Mahoney. So I'm sure they have to take that space for their own use.
There's also an impact to WPCA there. There's a pump house that I believe Art said there's a pump house that will have to be moved as a result of the project. That's a concern that I'm not sure DOT has considered yet, but they're using, oh God, multiple choice, and I get the engineering firm. It's gigantic. It's not Anchor. It's where we got Mike D'Amato from, CHA. They're using CHA to do the design work. So they've got armies of engineers looking at this stuff.
Mr. Bowser? It's Paul
Yes.
Anderson. Can I comment on the WPCA side of that?
Sure.
I'll make it quick. Okay, we have sent them an engineering package that to do what they suggested. They wanted us to move the sewer line and put in a new pump station, which would add another pump station to the Mill-Scantic route. We had an engineering firm put together a proposal and submitted it to them. It was over $6 million. So that's probably not going to happen. I can't tell you that, but they have all the documentation. So that's where it stands with the WPCA and the sewer line. Right now, it goes under the bridge, and they wanted it taken away from there.
Yeah,
So
Art
it's a very
was mentioning as
complex-
recently, Art was mentioning as recently as yesterday, his interest in that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we have time to do tax refunds and then the historic document preservation grants. And then I think we'll call it there. So would somebody like to make a motion on tax refunds?
Selectman Muska will move to approve the tax refunds totaling $424.27.
Is there a second?
Marie D'Souza will second that.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Okay. The last piece of business we'll take up before we recess for the town meeting was the added the added agenda item that was submitted by Amy Lamb, the town clerk. She is applying for phase 2, well, the second tranche of funding from the state library for historic documents preservation. And what she is seeking to do with that grant, which is for $5,500, is she's going to record and index documentation that will make it that will make public records more accessible to the public. So if you do a search on her website for certain land records, currently they can go back to, I want to say 1978. And this project would push that date further back so you could access them back to, I want to say 1972. The terms of the grant run fiscal year to from the first of the fiscal year to the end of the fiscal year. And we're just getting this now. And I asked Amy why that was. And her response was that this was the second offering of the grants. And I asked her what would happen if the funding, the 5,500 weren't expended within the remainder of the fiscal year. And she said that that won't be an issue. They will get the funds expended in short order. We've used the person she's contracting with before. He did a records indexing project, actually in hard copy, that cleaned out like a whole room worth of records at the in the old school at the annex. So the vendor is somebody who's known to us. The project is something that will allow more public access to land records, and the funding is there without a match. Any questions or comments on this? I think we've done this one a couple times as a group.
Jay, just for clarification, I read that June 30th, 2022 was the deadline to expend that $5,500 grant money, and if it doesn't get spent by then, it has to be returned.
Yep,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was my understanding.
that is correct. And Amy said it won't be a problem. She'll get it spent by then.
Okay.
So what I would like is a motion to approve the grant contract and authorize me to sign it.
Make a motion to authorize the board, the first selectman to sign the historic documents preservation grant application for fiscal year 2022, cycle 2.
There a
Selectman
second?
Muska will second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. At this point, I would ask for a motion to,
Aye.
oh wow, wicked lag on Al's part. I'd ask for a motion to recess the regular selectmen's meeting until the conclusion of the town meeting.
I'll make that
Selectman
motion.
Odell.
Motion made by Marie, seconded by
Selectman
Charlie. All in favor, please say aye.
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 We
Sorry,
are-
Charlie.
We are in recess at 7:25. It's 7:31. I'm going to call the special town meeting to order. The first item of business is the election of a moderator. Are there nominations?
Make a
Aye.
motion. Go ahead, Sarah.
Sarah Muska, 25 Maple Avenue. I nominate Jason Bauza as moderator.
Marie D'Souza.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Motion would be in order to close nominations.
Make a motion to close nominations.
Is there a second?
Selectman Nordell will second that motion.
So a motion has been made and seconded to close nominations. Folks, what I'm going to do is explain a couple of things before I call the roll. At this portion of the meeting, anybody can vote who is a registered voter in the town of East Windsor. When we get to the call of the town meeting, the question before us, only those people who are affected by it, which means anybody who is a taxpayer or a resident of what is the town of East Windsor Broadbrook Fire Department's jurisdiction, can vote. So because of the nature of a virtual meeting, I'm going to call the roll. So if you could unmute yourself, identify yourself by name and address, I will then ask for your vote. This is going to take a little bit, but we'll get through this. No, I have one here. So first up, Alan Baker.
Aye.
Marie D'Souza.
Aye.
Charlie Nordell.
Aye.
Sarah Muska.
Aye.
Paul Anderson.
Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Broadbrook. Aye.
Constance's iPad.
Constance Bancroft, 15 Hillside Farms Drive, Broadbrook.
Amy Bancroft.
Amy Bancroft, 5 Plantation Road.
Karen Paradise. Karen Paradise. Chris Ruos.
I'm sorry, Jason. It's Karen Paradise. I couldn't get it on mute. 45 Main Street,
Sorry, Karen.
Broadbrook.
Chris Roos, 125 Rockville Road, Broadbrook.
Galaxy Tab A. Heather Spencer.
Heather Spencer, 6C Reggie Way.
How do you vote, Heather?
Sorry, aye.
Let's try Galaxy Tab A again. Jay Purick.
Hi, Jason. Jason Purick and Megan Purick, 11 Skinner Road. We both vote aye.
Do you have to hear me?
Yes.
Megan Pioric, 11 Skinner Road. Hi.
Thank you, Matt. James Barton. Jerry's iPad.
Gerald Bancroft, 5 Plantation Road, aye.
Jim Bancroft.
Jim Bancroft, 60 Norton Road, Broadbrook, aye.
Joe. Leo Szymanski.
Leo Szymanski Jr., 44 Rockville Road, Windsorville. Aye.
Linda. Me.
B,
So screen identified as me, M-E.
That could be me, Jason. Tom Talamini, 23 Rice Road. Aye.
Nick Mixata.
Nick Mixata, 24 Sullivan Farm Road, Broadbrook. I vote aye.
Thank you, sir. Noreen.
yes.
Paul Anderson voted already. Resident. Tom Lansner.
'27 Laurel Circle, Warehouse Point. I vote aye.
And Ruth Ann.
And Ruth Ann Lansner, also 27 Laurel Circle, vote aye.
Vincent LeMay.
Vincent LeMay, 72 Main Street, Broadbrook. I vote aye.
Motions nomination of a moderator are closed. We're going to try this a little bit more expeditiously this time.
Jason?
All those in favor of Jason Bauza as
Jason?
moderator, please say aye.
Jason,
Yes, Peg.
this is me. I should be voting on that as well, because I'm at 28 Church Street in Broadbrook. Please, and I vote
Yes,
aye.
ma'am. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Jason, Nick Mixata,
All
my
in
wife's
favor?
here as well to note. Kathleen Mixata, 24 Sullivan Farm Road, say aye.
Thank you, folks. All in favor of Jason Bauza as moderator, please say aye.
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 All opposed? All right. I'm now going to ask the town clerk to read the town meeting public notice. Madam Clerk. Yes. You need the notice? You have it? Yeah, just
Okay.
speak loudly.
Okay, warning, notice of special town meeting, East Windsor, Connecticut, Broadbrook Fire Department. All electors and persons qualified to vote in town meetings regarding the town of East Windsor, Connecticut, Broadbrook Fire Department, which are those electors and voters located within the boundaries of the town of East Windsor, Connecticut town, excluding the Warehouse Point Fire District, the Broadbrook Fire Department jurisdiction, are hereby warned and notified that the Board of Selectmen of the town are convening a special town meeting for electors and voters of the Broadbrook Fire Department jurisdiction to be held via Zoom pursuant to the instructions set forth below at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, January 20th, 2022 for the following purpose. Item 1, to consider and discuss an appropriation regarding a proposal from Seagrave Fire Apparatus LLC in the amount of $1,049,658 for the purchase of a pumper tanker by the town of East Windsor Broadbrook Fire Department, dated at East Windsor, Connecticut, this 14th day of January 2022. East Windsor Board of Selectmen, Jason E. Bauza, First Selectman, Marie D'Souza, Deputy Selectman, Sarah Muska, Selectman, Alan Baker, Selectman, and Charlie Nordell, Selectman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm now going to read the eligibility to vote. At any town meeting other than a regular or special town election, or any meeting of any fire, sewer, or school districts, or any other municipal subdivision of any town incorporated by any special act, any person who is an elector of such town may vote, and any citizen of the United States over the age of 18 years or more, jointly or severally, who is liable to the town, district, or subdivision for taxes assessed against him in an assessment of not less than $1,000 on the last completed grand list of such town, district, or subdivision, or who would be so liable if not entitled to an exemption under Connecticut General Statute subdivision 17, 19, 22, 23, 25, or 26 of section 12-81 may vote unless restricted by the provisions of any special act relating to such town, district, or subdivision. So to reiterate what the clerk read previously on the question before us, anyone who lives within the territorial jurisdiction of the Broadbrook Fire Department will be eligible to vote on the question before us tonight. Now I'm going to ask for the resolution to be read.
I have the resolution. Item number 1, to consider and discuss an appropriation regarding a proposal from Seagrave Fire Apparatus LLC in the amount of $1,449,658 for the purchase of a bumper tanker by the town of East Windsor Broadbrook Fire Department. I move the foregoing resolution be adopted.
Is there a second?
Sarah Muska, 25 Maple Avenue, will second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion on the resolution? Is there any discussion on the resolution? Is there any discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Once again, I'm going to call on individual speakers. Please identify yourself by name and address. Selectman Baker.
340 Rise Street. Aye.
How do you vote, sir?
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Yeah, Marie D'Souza, 10 Rice Road, Broadbrook. Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Sarah Muska, 25 Maple Avenue, aye.
Galaxy Tab S2. I think that's Tom Talamini.
Tom Talamini, 23 Rice Road, aye.
Constance's iPad.
Constance Bancroft, 15 Hillside Farms Drive, Broadbrook, aye.
Karen Paradise.
Karen Paradise, 45 Main Street, Broadbrook, aye.
Rich Paradise, 45 Main Street, Broadbrook, aye.
Margaret Hoffman.
28 Church Street, and I would vote yes, aye.
Ray Tapazio. T. Arcari.
Thomas Arcari, 54 Hayton Road, Broadbrook. I vote yes. Jason, I also have 3 more guys in the fire that are going to vote. I'll turn them over to you right now.
Please have them identified by name and address and then cast their vote.
Bill Towers, 24 Sullivan Farm, Broadbrook, yes.
Bill Lewis, 44 Melrose Road, Broadbrook, yes.
Lewis Myers, 18 Main Street, Broadbrook, I vote yes.
That's all mine.
Amy Bancroft.
Amy Bancroft, 5 Plantation Road, Broadbrook, aye.
Chris Ruos. Did I call him all right? Galaxy Tab A. Heather Spencer.
Heather Spencer, 6C Reggie Way, aye.
Jay Purick.
Jason Purick, 11 Skinner Road, yes.
Megan Purick, 11 Skinner Road, yes.
Jerry's iPad.
Gerald Bancroft, 5 Plantation Road, Broadbrook, yes.
Jim Bancroft.
Jim Bancroft, 60 Norton Road, Broadbrook, yes.
Joe. Leo Szymanski Jr.
Leo Samansky Jr., 44 Rockville Road. Aye.
Linda. Nick Mexada.
Nick Mexada, 24 Sullivan Farm Road, yes.
Kathleen Mexada, 24 Sullivan Farm Road, yes.
Noreen doesn't live in the district. Paul Anderson.
Paul Anderson, 89 Main Street, Broadbrook. Aye.
Ray Tapazio. Vincent LeMay.
72 Main Street, Vincent LeMay. Yes.
Just call me. I don't know if
RJ Paradise's iPhone. Jason Bauza, 121 East Road. I vote yes. Is there anyone on the call eligible to vote who has not voted? Is there anyone on the call eligible to vote who has not voted? With that, I'm going to close the vote. Motion carries unanimously. Folks, thank you very much for joining. I appreciate your patience as we navigate this online format. With no other business to come before the town, I'm sorry. With no other business to come before the town meeting, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Alan Baker. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Nick Mexada. All in favor of adjournment of the town meeting, please say aye.
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 Opposed? We are adjourned at 7:49. For the Broadbrook Fire Department leadership, I will sign the contract tonight and it'll be available for pickup tomorrow morning.
Jason, I dropped off a new contract today to your office with the mistake straightened out in it. I don't know if Jennifer gave it to you.
Yeah, I have the I have the amended one.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody who supported us for this fire apparatus. It was much appreciated.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for getting it here. Madam Clerk, you're good. At 7:49, I would reconvene the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Doesn't matter, I'm alone.
So moved.
Selectman Nordell will second that.
Ask for a motion to take up agenda item 9B, discussion of the 2022 legislative session to include Senator Anwar, Representative Foster, and Representative Hall.
I'll make that
motion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll make
Marie.
that motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm going to turn this off because that's distracting me like crazy. Good evening, Senator Anwar. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you.
So I understand Representative Hall is unavailable due to family obligations. Any idea if Representative Foster is joining?
I have not heard from her yet.
Okay, I pinged her. So Senator, we're as excited as anybody about the start of the 2022 legislative session. It looks like it's going to be virtual, at least to start again. But what we were hoping tonight is that you could kind of give a preview of what some of your legislative priorities are, And then I have a couple I'd like to share, and I'd invite the members of the board to do the same. So the floor is yours for as long as you'd like it.
Thank you so much. First, thank you for all that you all do for our town of East Windsor. I can share with you, this is going to be a short session. Obviously, most of you are aware that during the short session, we have the beginning and around the 8th of February, and it'll go on till the beginning of May. About 12 weeks of work will go in this session. Individual bills cannot be pursued. It has to go through committee. So it's a committee-based process. And that's why it's important to try to stay ahead of the curve, because individual legislators, even though they can propose bills, they have to have some financial component to the bills. As you're aware, thankfully, as a state, we are doing well financially with respect to the current status of our rainy day fund and the fact that we are able to pay some of our long-term obligations ahead of time. So we are doing well from that perspective. But obviously, that does not necessarily translate into what's happening to our individual communities and people. I'll share a number of different things, and I'll mention this with a caveat that I'm only the chair of the Children's Committee. And because of being the chair of the Children's Committee, I can be a little bit more comfortable in saying what the Children's Committee agenda is going to be. But I can talk about some of the other things that I'm interested in, and I can share them. But I obviously have to recognize that the chairs of those specific committees are going to be the ones who will think that these ideas are worthy or not worthy from their perspective and priority perspective. The fact that this legislative session is going to be initially, at least from the looks of it, like you said, for Selectmen Bauza, that this is going to be again remote initially, hopefully for a shorter time. But again, we don't know the ground realities around that. I think some of those conversations are happening as we speak. What we have learned is that the public hearing process, what we did in the last session, the public hearings, when we do them remotely, give a lot of luxury to individuals to participate who would not be able to participate otherwise, because we had in many situations, hundreds of people participate. We had many 24-hour-long public hearings last session. So there's a good side to it. The good side is that people get to participate from their homes who would not necessarily be able to do so otherwise. Otherwise, if you think about it, sometimes they have to be physically there for hours and it gets tiring. But with respect to the actual votes, we have been able to do them physically in the building, but still remotely, but we have to be physically there. So that's a separate conversation about the process that is above my pay grade, because it's going to be people deciding from the leadership of the two parties along with the governor's team. So they will be able to figure out is the safer way to approach that. Now, to your question, there are a number of things that are going to be very relevant at this time for us. First of all, recognizing that we are still in the midst of a pandemic. Many months ago, if somebody said you're going to be worried about Omicron, we would have said, well, what are you talking about? But here we are, we've had Delta, Omicron. Thankfully, Omicron is not as nasty as Delta was. If God forbid, the rapidity of spread of Omicron that we have seen, if that was of Delta, we will not have a meeting. We would be in a state of emergency, because Delta, how it was impacting the people, the Delta variant, which was quite severe, and the risk of death was much higher in that variant. Thankfully, this one is not as dangerous, but it does still spread very rapidly. So the total number of people who are infected is higher. So the proportion who are getting to the hospital are slightly higher from that perspective, but the number of people who are impacted are very large numbers. I've been in touch with some of the people. The hope and prayer is that by the higher power's grace, this could be the beginning end of this disease, because it has spread so far and wide in different parts of the world. There would be a chance that we will hopefully see the end of this because it's not as big of a killer, but it's spreading so rapidly that we may be in hopefully in a territory where the immunity will be good enough. That's the tired doctor in me that's hoping this way, and I wake up hoping this way because we really are getting tired with the illness, as I'm sure each and every one of us is going through that challenge. But the after effects of the pandemic are going to be front and center on my mind, as should be on all of our minds. The pandemic, of course, directly had an impact on the well-being of people, but the after effects are on our children, on the financial health and well-being of businesses and individuals. Those are the things that are going to become a very important part of our survival. So there's a first tier of changes that you would expect in my mind, and there's a second tier of changes that we're going to expect. So the first tier of changes are our children, because of the fact that they have not been able to interact the way they should be able to. They have seen their family under stress. They have already had some loss in the loved ones in many of the cases, job loss in their family members, a combination of all of those things with the existing baseline anxiety, depression that we have in children, that has reached the point that it is actually showing significant fault lines in our society. And those fault lines in the management of the children's well-being and health are being quite significant. Now, it's also very clear that the trajectory of behavioral and mental health for our children was moving in the wrong direction. And it was, in my opinion, because of lack of appropriate investment, and also the fact that because of how difficult of work this is, the workforce has never been encouraged to stay in it. So we have a lack of enough workforce in this arena because of working as hard and as emotional, difficult situation, and not getting actually a quality of life and support financially from this has led to people self-selecting them out of this industry. So that's where we will have to have a plan of action to try and undo some of that, but do it in a comprehensive manner. So a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago, we had a hearing that's available on CTN. And I think you can find the link on my Facebook as well about a public hearing and informational hearing that we had, where we got all the stakeholders of different levels of care that is provided to our children, whether it is in the school systems, whether it is in the outpatient setting or intensive outpatient setting or inpatient setting. All of those areas have gaps in them. And then those gaps need to be filled. My hope is that with some of the understanding and recognition, we will be able to get some support to actually have a comprehensive strategy going forward. So that's something that is going to be important. I am going to be part of a conference with Yale University around this tomorrow around 11:50. I think it's a Yale child health group that have asked me to speak on this as well, because I've been trying to look at some of the ways to approach and address some of these challenges. So we are going to try and look at it from the children's health and well-being perspective. That's going to be an important bill. And it's an important bill for each and every one of people, legislators. I have not yet to see any legislator who says, well, this is not my priority, because children are our priority, and then they should be taken care of and be taken care of. I can touch on some of the other children's committee bills and priorities as well, and then we'll go to some of the other parts as well. We saw some challenges where last week a child, actually recently, a few days ago, a child died from fentanyl overdose in Hartford. And it's heartbreaking at so many levels that we have this opioid epidemic just parallel with the other epidemic, and we have been trying to fight that, but we are losing that battle in many respects. And the fact that a 13-year-old had access to that in our school systems in our state is very concerning. And I strongly feel that this should be a comprehensive strategy on trying to address that aspect as well. And then that's something that we will have to look at, because we have to stop the supply, and there will be a appropriate law enforcement component of stopping that supply with collaboration with the federal agencies as well, but also with the state's power to be able to look at that. And then we also have to identify ways of prevention strategies, and then early identification and management strategies. These are all, again, a whole spectrum of issues that needs a comprehensive strategy. I am the vice chair of Public Health Committee, and I'm also vice chair of Insurance Committee. So I do voice my concerns of the fact that the insurance industry, as of right now, has not been able to help outpatient management costs for our children and for our adults if they have behavioral issues. Even though we passed a bill, and we passed a bill to make sure that the outpatient management was equal, but that bill, when we actually had the assessment done recently, to say what is going on after the law was passed, and lo and behold, we had passed the law, but the insurance industry was not following the law. So we're going to try to identify ways of creating mechanisms to have them do what is the law, to make sure that they provide care in the outpatient setting to children and adults for taking care of those needs. Because if we don't do that, guess what's going to happen? We're going to see the same opioids, same other issues in the inpatient setting, or God forbid, the worst case scenarios that we have seen recently. So I think that's something that is, in my mind, a very important thing. One part of that strategy is to make sure we have enough Narcan available. Now, we also learned that while our school nurses or school personnel would be able to use the Narcan and have that available, not all schools are doing it. So we will try and get a little bit better understanding. If we had the presence, some people believe that this child that died in Hartford, if Narcan was available in a timely fashion, that may have had changed the outcome. So we want to make sure that this inexpensive medicine at this time should be easily available across the board. About a year and a half ago, I was a co-sponsor of one of the bills, which was saying that people can get Narcan without prescription. So literally, you can walk to a pharmacy and say, I want Narcan. And they should be able to do that. And they will obviously have your record, but no insurance company can use that Narcan prescription against you in any shape or form and say, hey, why did you order that? Your life insurance is going to be canceled, and assuming that you're using opioids. And that was by law. And then actually, I keep Narcan in my car. The reason is that EpiPen and Narcan are two things that can actually, in a matter of 5 seconds or 10 seconds, can save somebody's life. So it's good to have some of those things available to you, because you don't have that many medicines out there that will save somebody's life in an instant. So I got that and had applied for life insurance, and they asked me, why did I order that? I said, you don't have the right to. I asked me that. And of course, I educated them on that, but it's just a little side note. But people should be able to order that, keep it in your cars. If you see somebody out there who has passed out or something, there's no negative side to the use of Narcan for the most part. You actually can save a life, and by 5 minutes, still healthcare services, EMS would show up. All our police officers and EMS have that available too. But I think in the school system, there's an opportunity to expand that further. Then we are trying to see if there would be a way to have a mechanism if there's inclement weather changes, if the local school districts may have the capacity to actually, in that time, say that they would remote learning at that time, if there have been more than acceptable number of weather-related days off, to make sure that the schools are able to perform that. The children will not be very happy about this, because that may reduce the snow days. But that's going to be up to the school to be able to do that. At least we should have a law that would allow the schools to make that choice. That's, again, my opinion. There are digital dangers that our children are facing, the sexual predators, and the individuals in our society, which are in many of the internet social media sites have algorithms which are causing health impact on our children. So there's an opportunity to take care of that. We had a bill in the past that was that children can still theoretically order vapes online and get it at home. If we want to try to tighten that to make sure there's a protection, because by law, the children shouldn't be getting vapes in a store or online. But the online part has some loopholes. I want to try and address those. I'm trying to look at the lead levels in our environment. Sometimes there is a difference in the acceptable lead levels in the federal law and the state law. I want to make sure that we have same levels, if you will, that are the for ones, which I believe are the federal, are better than our state laws. So I want to try to look at that. I'm still studying that part to make sure that's going to be on board. These are some of the bills that at least I'm looking at from the Children's Committee perspective. I see Representative Foster is here as well. So and then with respect to some of the other components, I would say we have public health related issues. I will talk about some of the things I believe from a public health bills. We have, I know that in the pandemic, what we have learned is that the assisted living facilities, they have not been regulated well. And when somebody is in the memory care unit, what was happening was that the facility was shut down. The memory care unit had 1 or 2 people working there, and they were like 20, 30 individuals there, and they would just put the food in front of them. If they had dementia, they would not be able to eat or drink anything. Nobody was charting. There was no record, and they would like horrendous stories, heartbreaking stories from across the state, including one from one of the former mayors of the town of South Windsor who died. Where he did not get food, enough food, or he was not fed during that time, and the family could not come. My concern is that when we actually asked the assisted living facilities, their perspective was that, well, we are not required to do that. And we are trying to see if we can fix that and then by law try and make sure that there is they're regulated like a nursing home, so that we have the right amount of support, if you will, there. So that's something that is something we've talked about and looked at, and there's some hopefully we'll be able to do this. Workforce in healthcare is going to be a critical thing. So that's the second tier. I said that the after effect of this disaster, we are looking at the job losses and economic losses that needs to be looked at, and the emotional and the mental health challenges people are facing. The second tier is going to be the workforce. People working healthcare is no longer a lifestyle or a benefit that people enjoy during this pandemic, and a lot of people have actually moved towards retirement or moving to another place. First, they're not getting paid enough, they're not getting recognized enough. Yes, we put a sign outside that we love you, but that sign doesn't pay their bills, and that's part of the challenge that we are seeing in a lot of individuals, and as a result, they're retiring and then moving on to other jobs if they could. And we will have to, and then by the time we will need some of the healthcare people, there'll be a challenge. I wanted to make sure that we have a way of acknowledging, respecting, and retaining the current healthcare workers, and then obviously having a robust education program to be able to address that further. There are other components, I think, on public health that are worthy to look at. Which are, of course, increasing the training programs for behavioral health, training programs for rural health that are we're looking at as well. That should be part of this thing. And again, I have to say that with a grain of salt, that this would ultimately be dependent on the chair of those committees if they think that's worthy from their perspective. I can go on for a long time, for another 2-3 hours, because there are a number of different bills. Last time I had about 150 bills, 100 of them have become laws. So but they have become committee bills and so on. So we have a lot of things we are hoping to do. You start with a very ambitious agenda in the whatever session you're in, but then you figure out what can be achieved, and then you keep working at it. So again, honored to be here. Love to listen to your ideas. Love to listen to what we can do as a team, myself, Representative Hall, Representative Foster, to make the lives of our citizens in East Windsor better. And I'll stop here. If you have any questions, I can go deeper into some of the different other directions. I'm just giving you a sliver of what we are working on. And I think Representative Foster is here, and she will talk about, she has so much energy that I actually just look at her energy and I said, oh my God, I have to take steroids to just keep up with her. So Representative Foster.
Secret, no, just kidding. I appreciate that. That's so kind of you, because I feel the same way about you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with everyone in East Windsor tonight. And it's been really nice to talk to a lot of you, and your information that you've brought has informed in a lot of ways the legislative agenda that I have. So I'll just dive right in, if that's okay. It's so nice to see you all, though. one of the bills that I'm introducing, I have a lot of hopes they'll be raised as a committee bill as well, but I'm introducing because I want to make sure the separate components that I've researched are coming along specifically through the system. So is an act concerning the mental health crisis. Something that I've paid particular attention to in these conversations that I've been having are a few things that I think are specific to the 57th district between Ellington and East Windsor is our education-based interventions to assess children's mental health are different between our schools. And I just want to make sure that we're being really cognizant that the systems that we select are going to look favorably at both towns and are going to be significantly positive impacting the child mental health crisis in both towns. So one thing is Ellington favors school psychologists and East Windsor has more school social workers in their school system. And so if we favor one or the other in funding models and not both of those, that advocacy wouldn't positively impact both towns. So I want to make sure that as we have these conversations, we're doing it in a way that's going to most robustly benefit the community, and our school districts are different. So that's one of the bills that I'm introducing around mental health. I've also spent a lot of time talking to colleagues at UConn in the psychology department, and they're working really hard on the workforce development related to psychology and addressing children's mental health. I think that's going to be really important to our community. I want to make sure that we don't forget the people who are already in our community doing really good work around mental health, and make sure that we're addressing ways that we can support those workforces that exist. So our social services folks in the community and our health services folks in our communities that are doing that work in intervention, what additional supports do they need to do that work better? And I want to make sure that we're robustly addressing those needs. And something I'm interested in, and I've talked to the chair of the Public Health Committee, which is one of the committees, we were both on children's and public health together, Sayed Anwar and I, is addressing, perhaps looking at a community healthcare worker model related to the mental health crisis. That's fundable in part by the feds, which makes it a lot more financially appealing. But what's interesting about a community healthcare worker model is we train folks up really quickly as community healthcare workers and their peers. So in mental health issues, having a peer address helping you meet your mental health concerns sometimes can be better received. It is not in any way, shape, or form interchangeable with a social worker or a psychologist, but elevating community health workers might help sort of triage some of the emergent mental health situations that we're seeing in the community. So those are some of my thoughts around the mental health bill. I have a much more robust proposal that's going in. I'm happy to talk to folks about that online. I'm working with my colleague who is the Senate co-chair of the Crumbling Foundations Caucus on addressing crumbling foundation issues as they continue to be a pressing concern in our communities. I have a pretty comprehensive bill on well water contamination and expansion of public utilities, hopefully addressing some of the federal infrastructure money that can help our communities where there are private water systems and private wells that are contaminated with what is now in the academic space being more broadly identified as contaminants of emerging concern that include but are not limited to what East Windsor and Ellington have been seeing all along, EDBs and nitrates, but also road salt runoff and PFAS. And so looking at those things and the things that come next that are contaminating our public, private, and groundwater supply, making sure that we are robustly able to act to make sure that our drinking water is steadfastly safe and accessible to folks. We've been talking a lot about solar incentives and V&M cap and trying to sort of alleviate some of the pressure from our farmland space. This is something that's in an East Windsor driven request, broadly supported in Ellington as well, to try and make sure that we can meet our green energy goals in a way that does not feel like it's putting a lot of pressure on gobbling up space that is in our communities in Ellington and East Windsor. So incentivizing things like carports and rooftop solar and making those more favorable in the solar array space. I'm hoping to reintroduce and work with my colleagues on what was raised as Senate Bill 697, which we're calling the Jason Bowser bill. And I'm sorry, that's colloquially, of course, but I will let the first selectman explain that more extensively and its goals and objectives, since it's his genius conception that led to it. And then lastly, this has come up a lot better around a lot of folks around COVID, as they've talked about like what we can do to prevent negative effects around the pandemic and be more robustly healthy as a community. I've decided to really lean in an area that is my expertise, and I'm introducing something that's called the Connecticut Food as Medicine State Plan. And this is going to be a comprehensive bill to address accessibility of healthy foods. And what I really like about Food as Medicine as a state plan is it's really good for farmers, and it's really good for folks who don't have consistent, reliable access to healthy, fresh food. And so I'm happy to talk more in detail about what those plans will look like and where I hope those will go. But in a short session, I am ambitious, but tempered in my expectations. And so I'm really excited to hear from everyone in East Windsor about what I can be doing. And I'll just say this before, I pass the baton to the next speaker, that I really hope that these conversations are the springboard of conversations that I can have with folks in the community. I don't want to just, have like unidirectional, like these public comments. Like if people want to like brainstorm or talk about ideas for bills with me, I'm really happy to schedule time to talk to folks and make sure that we can be meeting comprehensively your needs. And I should say, I have been working with many of my colleagues on a public safety related bill. And I know that our communities are talking a little bit about juvenile justice related issues, and that I am talking to colleagues on both sides of the aisle, and particular attention with Moderate Caucus, having conversations about what that would look like in our communities and the additional resources that some communities are getting right now to address increase in break-ins. That seems to have been less of a problem in East Windsor than some of the surrounding towns. But I'm here and interested in hearing other issues that I can be helpful on.
Thank you, Representative. And both to you and Senator Anwar, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on the session and for joining us tonight. The short session, the rules are different. We recognize that you guys can't just introduce bills on any given topic, but there are ways to get key issues raised for discussion and consideration in the session, whether that be working with your colleagues in key positions or finding a budgetary impact. I'm hopeful we can have a good session for the town of East Windsor. I'm going to ask the members of the board if they have some thoughts. It's a 3-page document that I'm not going to read verbatim, but I have 9 different topics that I want to share. Representative, you talked about the tax abatement statutory fix. I won't go into painstaking detail on that, but that is necessary for a town like ours, which is sandwiched along I-91 and sharing Route 5 with both South Windsor and Enfield in terms of being competitive from an economic development standpoint. They can move tax abatements much quicker than we can, and that's a statutory fix that we need help with. There was that bill 697 last year. I have a couple of other thoughts on that would potentially strengthen that or ease some of the arguments around it. That I'm going to do up an actual formal letter to all 3 of you so that you have a document to work from. But I'm glad to hear that was on the priority list. Thank you very much.
And I don't want to speak for Rep. Hall, but I did talk to her about this a lot, and she was really supportive, and I think that she is going to be really helpful in these conversations. So I just want to mention that I was able to have a conversation with her yesterday, and she was supportive. So I think collectively the delegation's moving in sync on that.
And I got to say, our delegation in total, you guys work really, really well together, and that serves the town very, very well. So I'm appreciative of all 3 of you.
Just so you're aware, the chairs of the planning and development, and they already have a letter asking them for this bill.
Excellent.
The Jason Butler bill.
Yeah, we got to come up with a better name than that. So the elephant in the room obviously is the casino. East Windsor did not do well in terms of the sports betting bill. We were one of the only towns to come out on the short end of that deal. So I appreciate the effort that you guys made and others in the General Assembly, Senator Casano, Senator Austin, and others around trying to make East Windsor whole around that. I've had conversations with some people in key positions within one of the tribes, and they've explained some things to me that make it a bit more clear what the concerns are. They're going to be hard pressed to dispose of that property for 6 years. The legislation prohibits a gaming facility from being there for 10, but they can't get rid of the property for 6 years because of the potential for litigation from MGM challenging the sports betting law. Without that leverage point, the bargaining chip, if you will, that the East Windsor parcel presents, then there's nothing stopping MGM from filing suit and trying to vacate the law, or at least getting an injunction. That would be bad for all parties concerned. So our initial ask during the last session, or one of the asks during the last session, had been to get a budgetary appropriation for $3 million to the town of East Windsor, making up for the loss of the impact payment in the original agreement between the town and MMCT. Recognizing that there is only a 6-year prohibition on them dispossessing that property, could we revisit that with a more reasonable ask in terms of dollar amount and duration that might make that a bit more palatable, especially considering the state's financial footing now? Instead of $3 million a year in perpetuity, could we do $1 million a year for 6 years or until the property is sold? That to me is a much more reasonable and doable ask this year than 3 million was last year. I would just throw that out there for consideration. But that at least gets East Windsor back, in the winner's circle in terms of the sports betting deal.
I can just answer that right now, Jason. It's in the works. I've had a chance to talk to the chair of the appropriation about this topic. I'll just leave it at that so that the opposing forces don't get too much energy.
Okay. One of the perennial asks that we have, and Senator, you and I have been there together, but one of the perennial asks that we have is Solent North. The state psychiatric facility that's located in the Warehouse Point section of town, it's ideally located to be a municipal complex. It looks like a government building. It's in close proximity to the highway. It's in close proximity to our business corridors. We could co-locate all of our municipal resources there. It makes a ton of sense from the town's perspective. And every year this bill gets put in, and every year DCF's response is, we're still using it. Okay, that's fine. I understand that. However, the Connecticut Examiner ran an article, I think that it published yesterday, called Solent North Psychiatric Center Struggles with Staffing and Shortages and Downsizing. So if there is now a resource constraint on Solent North and they're looking for how to right that ship, I'm wondering if there's not an opportunity now to kind of right size or to revisit that conveyance of that parcel to the town so that it benefits us and it benefits the state in terms of not having to have that resource issue. I'm not sure that would go anywhere. It's just the timing of the article was such that I would be remiss if I didn't raise it with you guys.
I saw that article, and I have on my to-do list still to follow up with the local PD. Are they still having issues? Is there anything that you can share that you're aware of in the surrounding area around it? Just is that something that they're still spending a lot of law enforcement time, energy, and effort in that region?
They do a lot of responses to 36 Gardner Street. That's a top 5 probably. You'd have to
I read it and I heard about lower staffing. That was my immediate concern, because in my meeting with the Chief DeMarco, that was like one of the conversations that we had at length. So it was one of my worries when I read that article yesterday.
I'm glad you caught that. I'm glad that hit your radar. So in the absence, go ahead, Senator.
With the current crisis and the lack of enough space for children in our state, this is not the perfect time to even have that conversation when we are trying to get space and admission for some of the places. But everybody knows that East Windsor is the town. This belongs to East Windsor essentially, but I can tell you, practically speaking, we may not be able to get anywhere this year. But right now there are other places. We have to figure out if there are other places. So we will have to have a strategy from the state's perspective. Are there better facilities available in our state to provide better care? And if we have that option, then we will obviously be looking at this for sure.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that that's how you see things. I share that perspective. So that gets me to my next thing. In the absence of being able to get Solent North, I would ask that we consider doing a land swap. So this parcel here, the one that looks like a K, that is owned by a private developer who owns the Hartfield office building, and it's almost entirely wetland. This parcel here, the rectangular parcel that's almost the same size, is developable property. It's on the Solent North campus. It's a nook that they're not doing anything at all with. And they don't seem to have any plans to do anything at all with it. So the person who owns this large parcel here that looks kind of like the 1st Congressional District, they have expressed interest in doing an additional development similar to or larger than Hartfield Landing on that parcel, but they need this piece in order to do it. So if we can't get all of Solent North, could we do a land swap? Could we do a conveyance of this 4 acres in exchange for the 3 acres of wetlands? Is that something that might be more palatable to the powers that be? I'll be honest, I don't really know how that works.
Can you send that to me? And I don't want to give an answer right now, but I'm very happy to look into it.
I would be happy to do that. Oh, special education funding. This is another retread from years past, and you guys probably know more about this than I do, but the impact on school districts when you have a severe special needs student move into a district mid-budget year could have crippling effects on a municipal budget. Conversely, when you have a high-cost special needs student move out of a district mid-budget year, all of a sudden you have a district with a windfall of budgeted money and no longer an expense for it. So in order to allow municipalities to provide the level of special education services that we expect without having a detrimental effect on our municipal budgets or the need for additional appropriations, is there some mechanism or some opportunity for us to lock in that, you know, if a student moves from East Windsor to Ellington in November, East Windsor will cover the special education costs for that student at their budgeted rate until the end of the school year. And at least that way there's some continuity and some smoothing of the process. And in circumstances where a special education student may be moving in from out of state, have the state assume the educational costs for that student until the next budgeted opportunity. That way, everybody is recognizing our obligation to provide public education for students in our care and keeping, but we are able to at least manage the budget in such a way so that we can do that within planning means. I don't know when the date is to lock in. I don't know if that would be a March 1st or a July 1st or a September 1st or whatever, but if there were some date consistent, that at least allows for the local governance to plan, to budget, to make sure that we know where our expenses are coming from. But this is another retread, so I'll throw it out there.
Do you have something to say, Senator? First, I'll allow you to go.
Well, I think, Jason, we asked about this the last time around as well. So it works both ways. When somebody leaves, they'll take their money, and somebody comes, they'll bring their money with them. So, and I think it was felt in my conversations that it was not as simple as that, because the infrastructure to keep the child from when you take the money away is quite significant. So it harms as well when you take the money away, if you will. So if, let's say, a family moves and a special ed child moves out of East Windsor, you have a support system that you have created, and that is. But I think many of the towns were hesitant, and then this is a very large issue across the state. And because of the significant variation, there was a work group that had recommended a captive insurance strategy. And that strategy was being cooked but has never been implemented. I'm not in those committees at this time, but the idea was that if every town gave a little bit of money into that captive insurance, because the total pool of the children more or less is not going to change that much, that every town would have an opportunity to draw on that changes rather than have a big shift in the bill. So that's where I left it in the last time I had a conversation with the education leaders about this. But I think if we can get that captive insurance going, we would be in a better shape, but I'm not sure where that is. So I'll have to do a little bit more homework. But this is a chronic issue in every single town across the state.
Yeah.
So
Sorry,
go ahead.
No, please.
So I'll only add, this is one of the areas that in a lot of ways, this is a good place for consensus of an agreement for policies that works well for both Ellington and East Windsor public schools. This is like the biggest challenge, I think, of representing this district is the differences in our school system's needs and to their funding. But volatility in special ed funding is a really pressing concern in both towns. I just would want to be cognizant that if we made a move like this, what it would do to a stabilization fund that Ellington's created to address the volatility in their special ed funding. And because that account, and I'll have to go back and double check the details before I follow up, but my understanding is that account is earmarked. And so if something happened and was implemented and they were not adequately prepared, I don't know how easily that money would be reallocated in the way that account was created. So I'll have to follow up and make sure that what we're proposing will be meaningfully stabilizing for both towns. But I had a call about a week and a half ago with the school finance groups, and they have some interesting perspectives on stabilizing special education funding and proposals around this issue. But it is like the perennial challenge. And I think that's like kicking a can down the road over and over again. I'd like to see solution to it. And so I will circle back around and making sure that I'll be getting finance perspectives from both towns to make sure that we can do something that really well serves both communities.
So thank you for that. I actually spoke with the superintendent here, and Dr. Tudrin provided me with some insight into excess cost and a way of stabilizing that, so that smaller districts with a higher per pupil expenditure don't effectively get short funded in comparison to larger school districts with a lower per pupil expenditure. I'll forward along his plain English suggestion for how to improve that when I forward you guys a memo. ARPA. So there's a lot of money right now that the state has.
That was the best transition I've ever seen in a meeting.
Oh, look, something shiny. So the state's allocation, I don't know if the legislature has decided, or if it has been decided that the legislature is going to have a role in allocating the state's ARPA allocation. But one of the priorities that's coming through CROG, and that I actually insisted they put in their legislative proposals, was that when projects are being awarded for regional economic development, that there has to be that multi-town component to it. So to think about a project would get a higher ranking if it had a multi-town benefit. For example, if they were going to redo the traffic circle or the traffic intersection around Buckland Mall, Buckland Road and whatever that other intersection is, that would have a benefit for Manchester and South Windsor. And so that's the type of regional effect that would have regional implications that CROG is suggesting should be prioritized rather than individual town projects. And the reason I think that's beneficial to East Windsor is we very often aren't awarded those type of individual town projects. And I think the likelihood that we would benefit from some of the federal money if we were working in tandem with neighboring or regional partners is higher. I also think that kind of lends itself towards the philosophy that's gone on in municipal and state government in recent years anyway. So I think that's a relatively reasonable talking point.
Can I think it's a very good idea. I can tell you, everybody wants to have some way of controlling some of those funds if we can. Obviously, the legislators from the state side, we want to be able to have a say in it. So I think there's going to be some effort to try and have a meaningful say in that. So that's one thing I can share with you, that we are hoping to do that. Whether we'll be successful or not, the reason is that there are specific requirements and expectations from ARPA based on the federal law. So we'll have to work within that law for the time being.
Yep.
I also want to share with you, what East Windsor has done under your leadership for the existing funds that were to help some of the businesses is truly a model for the state. The reason is that you've already taken care of your obligation, and people are having meetings right now to figure out what to do. And then to me, I'm just saying, hey, call this number, call Jason Bauza. You actually save all the head, because what you have done in East Windsor, the entire group has done a phenomenal job on making sure that the businesses who are hurting would actually get their funding. And right now, because of this current phase, the businesses are in trouble. And then they were in trouble 3 months ago, and 2 months ago when you started your effort. So right now, there's still the town councils and everybody's trying to look at what do you do now, what is the strategy, and so on. So I just want to mention how wonderful you have done and served the businesses in East Windsor so well. So thank you for that, and we'll work on ARPA to see what we can achieve through that.
Thank you, Senator. I think the whole board is very proud of that project, and it has been. I have gotten calls from all over the state with people who are asking questions and figuring out how to emulate it or tweak it. It's been, imitation is the highest form of flattery, and it really shows that, we wanted to put our money where our mouth is, and that other towns are trying to do the same thing. I'm really, really proud of that. I know the rest of the board is too.
I'm sending them all your way.
I've got 2 other things, and then I'll turn the mic over. The next one has to do with solar, and this was put forward by our Planning and Zoning Commission chair. So as you know, East Windsor is going to be home to about 25% of the state's cited renewable energy generation once gravel pit solar is built. That is a big threshold for one small town to burden. The Board of Selectmen has sent and the Planning and Zoning Commission has sent a letter to the Siting Council saying, effectively, thank you, we've done our part. And the state does have 2 competing public policy goals. One, the clean energy generation, but 2, farmland preservation. And we don't want to be so overburdened on one that we lose sight of the other. So the Planning and Zoning Commission chair came up with a proposal that I'd share with you now, that there be some sort of a cap on either the total percentage of farmland or possibly on the megawattage cited that can be used for solar generation in any given municipality. That way, more towns would have some skin in the game, and not just those places that are open and flat. I recognize that solar companies like open and flat. That's specifically what they are looking for. But the burden of meeting a statewide goal shouldn't fall on just a handful of municipalities. That said, there was also a number of there. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jamie.
Sorry, per capita or per town?
Per town.
Okay.
Because you're talking about land mass. It's not a product of population. But there were a number of competing bills last session that if they all had passed would have been calamitous for towns like ours. They would have required us to have stabilization agreements with any solar development that was trying to be sited here at a rate below what we would have negotiated fairly, and they would have been incentivized to do it in distressed municipalities, which all points to East Windsor. So as those legislative concepts come up, the devil is in the details with them. So I thought that the PZC chair's suggestion was meritorious to include. And the last thing that I would talk to you guys about, bonding. So we have a number of pressing needs that we really would benefit. And thank you both for your help in getting the I think it was 1.2 million that was bonded last year for the park spillway and the culvert replacement. we have some other clear and present needs that we're going to have to figure out how to address, but having some state assistance would be a big help in that. The first is our emergency radio system is almost 100% beyond its useful life. It's almost twice as old as it should be. Anytime there's a strong wind or a lightning storm and my phone rings from the police chief, my fear is that the system has died for good, to the point where we've got somebody up there with a coat hanger holding on during the lightning storm just to try and get the signal to be a bit clearer, jokingly. But the cost to replace that could be anywhere between $3.5 and $4 million. That is, if we have to do that, the choice that we'll make at that point in time is, do we replace our radio or do we put a roof on our school? That's a pretty bad position for us to be in, but that's a real possibility of a conversation that this board will have to be having soon. That gets me to our high school. Our high school needs a new roof. We are about to be in a position where we're putting $50,000 a year into fixing blistering on the roof that is going to have to be replaced anyway. We're going to be literally throwing good money after bad. So the choice becomes emergency radio system, new roof, or we have to meet another growing demand that we have in terms of municipal service center available in the community, which is we cannot grow our senior center anymore. We don't have the physical space to grow it. As the baby boomers continue to age, as the demand for services continues to increase, and it will, and as the demand or the opportunity to try and address people with early intervention versus responsive intervention, I mean, we want to be able to make sure we're providing services in terms of, estate planning or foot care or tax preparation or a litany of services that are more beneficial to people and helping them stay in their homes and staying productive in our community earlier than later. We don't have space to provide for any of those things right now. We just don't have the geographic footprint. So I am, as everybody under the sun knows, I am always looking for an opportunity to look into expanding that service. So if we could get bonding for a service center, that would be great too. And with that, I think I've exhausted my wish list for now. I do plan on following up with you guys with a formal letter. Again, just so that there's things you can look at as opportunity comes up. And if it would be helpful, if I were to send letters to the committees of cognizance for these things, I would do that as well. But I look for your leadership on that.
Can I clarify a couple of things quickly, Jason?
Absolutely.
On the solar one, can you give me a little bit more specific information? First of all, I think the virtual net metering is pretty much done now with respect to future allocation of funds. So, which I have a little bit of a problem with, but there is an opportunity to use community virtual net metering than the municipal virtual net metering that has been going on. So there may be something to that effect, but if we are going to have something, maybe there's an opportunity to tweak that bill from what you're saying so that we can actually have that protection in place. The bonding is going to be a bit of a fight, but it's worthy to try. I know there has been a request by our museum as well, and the trolley museum to actually have some fund for that too. There's a lot of needs in there. So we will have to have a pretty robust strategy going forward. And then we will have to have a trifecta strategy. One is we try from the Senate side, I can do that. And we have the House Democrats and then the House Republicans, and then the 3 or 4 of us or 5, whoever sits down and create a strategy. We get the same message across, and we will hopefully have better opportunity to fight this battle. And then we will have to also set priorities within the bonding requests as well. So I think that's going to be important. Sometimes you look at the bonding as a process as well. But I think there is the bonding is at this time pretty much under the governor's control completely. So that's where we will have to figure out a way to get the governor to see our needs right now. So I'll leave it at that. But I think if there was a legislative way of sharing that power, we'd look into that, and we're looking into that so that we can actually have, because we are interacting with you directly, right? The governor does not have the bandwidth to look at any of the town, no matter who the governor would be or is. So that's why a little bit of that control has to be with the legislators who are, in the absence of the pandemic, were in front of you and listening to you, but right now virtually are in front of you. So we have that capacity, so we should have some say in it. And we know what importance the school system has, and in the high school roof has, and in other components. So I think that's what I'm hoping we will have some strategy for that, but that's a process too. But meanwhile, we'll have that ask, but that ask has to follow up with some way of getting them to say yes. Sorry, long answer, but I want you to understand.
Yeah, that's, every governor, since there have been governors, has held on to the power to set the bond commission agenda very tightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy to carry, the water on all of these requests. I think that they're important. I'm curious if there are any, and I'm certain you've looked into this, so I apologize for asking something I'm certain you've done, but grant opportunities, particularly in the public safety sphere, for the radio project, is that something that's been investigated or considered?
The most direct one of those would be a federal competitive grant through Homeland Security. Senator Murphy expressed some ability to be able to help with that, but it's not going to be in the ballpark of what we need. It would, he was saying it was somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 versus, at the high water mark for the quote that I got was 4.8. So 500,000 or 600,000 is nice, but I'm still 4 million short.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. And I'll,
I'm sorry, but don't mistake me. I'm following multiple avenues for all of these asks. I mean, there is a strategy that's developing, and I'm going to be coming to the Board of Selectmen with that either as part of my budget proposal or very shortly thereafter. It's just a matter of making sure I'm seeing all of the pieces that are available to us locally, and then engaging you guys at the state level, and then looking for other resources beyond that.
And I appreciate that. I was certain that you had investigated. I'm happy to look into this and work collaboratively with my colleagues on it, and hope that we can deliver. We will certainly try our hardest.
So with that, I've sucked up some of the soapbox here that I probably shouldn't have, but do any members of the board have any concerns or issues that they would like to see addressed by our legislators?
Yeah, I have a list of 19 items I'd like to go over now.
You pay me to do this.
Yeah, I actually just had 3 things. If nobody else minds, I'll start. First of all, I'd like to thank both Representative Foster and Senator Anwar. You guys are always so busy for us, and I feel like we're really well represented here. So thank you very much for all the work that you're going to be doing and everything that you have been done, that you have done. I wanted to just touch on a couple things that Jamie, that you had brought up. First with the solar, and we've talked about the various aspects and how solar is affecting our town. But I noticed that a lot of and you brought up carports and kind of alternate, kind of ways of delivering solar. And I just wanted to, highlight that, noticing that a lot of the companies only offer like rooftop solar. And I can't remember exactly what the reason was, but I think it is policy based and something to do with the Green Bank. I don't have all the details, but for a lot of people, like people that have historic homes, and maybe their house is just not situated correctly, for that, ground-based systems would be better. And and really when you're talking about solar, the ground-based pole-mounted azimuth tracking array is the most efficient, right? Because you're getting the most you could possibly get out of that array because it's facing the sun at the right angle all day long. So those are, I'd like to see them either incentivized or allowed to do it or whatever. So it's more options for residential solar, which obviously the more of that takes place, the better off, our overall goal is. So I just had that to mention. And then I didn't get a chance to attend your, I think it was a Facebook event for the wells and the bad wells. And I'm sure you know that East Windsor, I think, has the highest concentration of bad wells in the state. And a lot of people on my road also have this issue. And it's not just the EDB. There's a few other things that are around here that we are dealing with. And there was a program that the state was using that if people had certain contaminants and at certain levels, that the state was providing a reverse osmosis system and maintaining that for them at no cost to the residents. And I guess that got kind of expensive or something, because what they did is they lowered they raised the acceptable limit for the contaminants, and then a whole bunch of people were no longer eligible for that program. So I don't know, if that was covered in your meeting, but when we do talk about contamination, we certainly do need a lot of attention on that in East Windsor, and the programs that were in place were good programs, and it was a really distressing to a lot of people in the neighborhoods that they were kind of cut out of that. So just.
Oh, sorry. I'm happy to speak a little bit about this topic. I feel like I know more about wells than I ever thought that I would. And the water supply. And when I ran for office, this is like not an issue that I expected to dig in so much on. But what I will say is the East Windsor having the most well contamination is part of the problem. I don't know that we can quantify that, and that sentiment exists in both Ellington and East Windsor and Tolland, that they have like the most long-standing well water contamination. I think that when I've worked with the local health department, they were able to identify through historical mapping that were hand-drawn, these maps that circled communities where they had streets that were identified that likely had contamination. So one of the components of my bill is going to be to direct GIS mapping and monitoring of reported well water contamination. Part of the problem in this issue and advocating for money to be allocated is that there is not a requirement for testing a privately owned well on your property. And so people will test them when they have reason to believe that something's wrong. And sometimes it's wrong even when you don't taste it. And when they sell their home. And so people are going for long periods of time not testing. And I think lots of people are in that boat. And so one, the private well water contamination is part of the problem. I have been learning that reverse osmosis filters are actually not a perfect solution, because in the way that they work and the backwash out of the system, if the problem is contamination in the groundwater largely, their backwash can be contaminating surrounding and downstream wells. So the specific policy that you're talking about, I'm not familiar with what happened and when it changed. What I do know is that the DOT, DEEP, and municipalities in certain situations are providing water when the source of contamination has been identified to be at the fault of the DOT, for example, with road salt runoff, or a municipality with road salt application. And so they're providing potable water for houses that need that. The contaminant levels sometimes are federally set and sometimes don't exist. So for salt, there is not a contaminant of concern level. And this is like something that Sayed and I like lean into with our expertise. I think lots of people are like, salt's non-toxic, who cares? But like everybody, and not actually everybody, but everyone under 2 and everyone over 65 and everyone with heart disease, anyone with a predisposition for kidney disease and anyone with eye problems shouldn't be having extra salt. And that is basically everybody. And so we have extra salt in our private wells, but also in our public drinking supply. And so before the community conversation that I convened that Senator Anwar was a part of, Senator Anwar convened another conversation previously with the experts that have been working on the saltwater contamination municipally. And they shared a map that I had not seen before that meeting. And I don't think that Dr. Anwar had either, that showed that our public water supply has a rising level of salt in it. So I am not leaning towards putting all my eggs in the basket of a reverse osmosis filter. I think like we have to have a multi-pronged approach. We have to like decrease salt application and other contaminants that could be getting into our water supply. And then we have to be routinely testing. My understanding from feeling like I know the community pretty well is that you all don't want the legislature to mandate private homeowners to annually test their wells. But part of the bill that I'm introducing is going to be a permissive language requirement for municipalities to annually remind private homeowners to test their well. I am hoping that whether that bill gets anywhere or not, municipalities will work with me to encourage people to test their wells, and when they find contaminants to report them to the Department of Public Health. Part of the problem we also have in this quantification is that DEEP has a list and DPH has a list and the municipal health departments have a list. And then how those lists are indexed are concerningly different. So like there's not a GIS maps yet for this, but our local health department has issues by homeowner organized by address, not by issue. So if I wanted to get a list of every home that had EDB contamination or road salt runoff contamination, and I called the health department, and I'm saying if, but when I called the health department to ask for this list, that doesn't exist. They would have to go through every home file that they have in the health department. And remember, we're living through a global pandemic right now. And so asking the health department to do this was a very burdensome ask for them to quantify the number of homes that are impacted. So what they did instead was gave me a map of the communities that they had known historical and institutional knowledge of communities being impacted. This is one of my big concerns that I think once we start quantifying this, we're going to find that the issue is not East Windsor specific, it is statewide, and that we have a much bigger problem on our hands than I think most people have been realizing. And so I'm really hoping we can start tracking that data. And I'm not typically a fan of being like data collect and then like wait and see. I think we need to advocate for money in East Windsor to expand public water because that's tested and regulated and I feel confident in its safety. But then we also need to make sure we know so that when we have money, we can determine the communities with the highest need and the most impact for allocating those funds. And I'm not really confident that we have that data yet. So sorry.
Let me just say, make 2 sentences. I'll make 2 sentences. It'll be simple. Just in addition to what has been said. I think, first of all, it's scary to realize that the person in the state who's dealing with this is just one body. You want a lean state. And then one of the most important issues, we have one human being that is addressing this issue at the state level. And that's something scary, but that's real. And everybody wants to make the state lean. Our current amount of personnel is at 1950 level. The number of people working for the state are what we had in 1950. So before people say, oh, cut down the budget and so on, keep that in mind that if we cut that budget and that one person will be gone or something to that effect. Next thing is the towns will have to, municipalities should have a strategy about public water expansion, and they have to have maps around some of these areas. And I think Jason is already working some of the areas, and that's probably an area of opportunity that we need to figure out. And maybe that's going to be a bonding ask as well. That will be a number 11 ask probably, Jason, to see if there's money for that purpose.
I'm on page 5 now.
So, I'll just move on to the one third thing. And this was for both of you that I just wanted to, make a general you know, I think I did this last year too, warehouse point boostering. So the warehouse point booster, the warehouse point district is our economic engine. And, you know, with the transit-oriented development that is going on and has been going on in Windsor Locks, and then what I would think are complementary warehouse point study and Route 5 study, there's a lot of data. We have a lot of data on our side and a lot of opportunity to tie into what's going on in Windsor Locks. I think that if there are, and, you know, obviously everybody wants a piece of the bonding pie, everybody wants some of the money, and there's no money. But, you know, if there's transit funds, if there's DOT funds for specific things like, you know, streetscaping in Warehouse Point and pedestrian improvements, which, you know, you may not think as a business, an economic driver, but it is. Those things I would love to see, you know, anything that we can do to move those chess pieces forward a little bit to improve that area, you know, for residents and for business, I think is something that we definitely don't want to miss the boat on. That's it for me. Thank you.
To Alan's point, we just worked with CROG to do a Route 5 corridor study that was just accepted in final form early November. The upside is we have some really shovel-ready stuff around the Route 5 corridor that is now ready to go and that has been vetted by a third-party design firm. The downside is it all comes with gigantic price tags. The stuff that, you know, we won't be able to do with in most cases without state or federal assistance.
The nice thing about the Route 5 study that they did this time that I haven't seen before is they broke it out as kind of a menu. You can have, you know, can you afford 600K here? Can you afford 1.2 over there? You know, so you don't have to do the whole thing. And like I say, if we could get it, you know, a little piece to get that started. And then the Warehouse Point study, which was kind of based around, you know, has different facets to it. You know, is based around, you know, if you want to be able to increase your the efficient use of the land, how do you deal with the water in that area, right? So we had to solve that problem before you could do anything else. And so that's what that did. But it also, you know, so there's some things you can do from an, you know, environmental standpoint, flood zone kind of stuff. But there's also, again, shovel ready, like streetscaping things that you could do right in downtown that connect directly to Windsor Locks. So, so yeah, I mean, it's money that we don't have and money that probably nobody has, but if there is something out there, it would be great if we could take advantage of it.
The Safe Routes to School grant, is that viable for this?
I'm not familiar with that.
Neither am I, but I'll bet you it is because one of those intersections is at the high school that they want to do some improvements to. So
I know that's a competitive grant, but I think it's rolling application. I'll look it up and send it your way.
Thank you.
And that's it for me. And again, thank you guys so much for all the work you guys do. And pass my comments on to Representative Hall. I'm sure she'd like to hear that.
Anybody else with comments or suggestions for our legislators? Marie. Marie, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to refrain from commenting about our radio system and the need for bonding. That radio system, just briefly, what happened to my thing? Sorry. Just briefly, useful life of that system was 2013. And we're currently having problems with the replacement parts. So as Jason said, at any moment, we could be in trouble with our radio systems in town, which we wouldn't be if we had money coming from the casino, but we don't have the casino. So maybe, Jason, this is the time to reach out to the governor and say, hey, look, this is what you did to us. This is our need. And instead of asking for $1 million over the course of the 6 years, maybe they can buy into doing something to help us fix that situation that we have at the police department in lieu of that dollar amount. That's just my opinion, so I'm just throwing that out there. The one issue that I have is the redistricting of East Windsor, breaking us out with Ellington, and then dividing us even further, dividing us out to Enfield. I have no problem with Ellington and East Windsor combining as one district, as it is now, well, as it was. But Enfield doesn't have the best interest of East Windsor, the section that they have, in my opinion. And I think it's harming us long term. If we were independent of ourselves, with one representative representing both sides of our town, which is our town, I think we would have better options to move forward in totality than a segment here and a segment there. So if you could do something to bring that back to the way it was, I personally would appreciate it. Plus it would make voting a whole lot easier too in town. That's another issue. But I just want to thank you to both of you and Carol for everything that you have done for East Windsor, because without you guys helping out along the way, I'm sure we wouldn't be where we are now. And the other thing, just real quickly, is the governor has seemed to leaving independent towns to make their own choice with regards to the pandemic that we're going through. I would hope that the legislature, when they go back in session, they would call and ask the governor if he would act as a governor to the entire state and come out with policies governing the COVID that doesn't pit one town against another and people from one town, people against another one. I know everybody has their own opinion and their own views on the subject. But if the governor would be that one person to make those decisions, it might help everybody to kind of come together and say, okay, everybody's doing this, so let's not keep fighting amongst themselves. It's just pitting towns against towns. I read on Facebook and I hear people saying, well, you know, I have to wear a mask in East Windsor, so I'm just going to go do my shopping elsewhere. I got to do this in East Hartford, but I don't have to do that in East Windsor, so I'm going to go to East Windsor. I think we're hurting ourselves by being such a divide that we are. So I just throw that out there because it's me. But again, thanks. That's all I got.
I will say, I wish Carol was here in this conversation here, and she's like here in spirit. I don't. I do feel like we work really well together as a delegation.
My comment has nothing to do with Carol Hall and how she's represented us. It's nothing at all.
No, I know. But it will be 10 years before redistricting occurs again. But just in the process, I'm not sure. I mean, the amount of influence that the local legislators have on the process is not tremendous, and a lot is driven by population shifts and changes related to the census. And this time also, the end of prison gerrymandering put a lot of pressure on this region of the state because of our concentration of prisons. And so hands were really tied in the way that districts shifted because the populations of prison populations diminished, and that left shifts of land moving folks forward. So that is like a feedback that's heard wholeheartedly, but I have I don't want to promise like an ability to act on that in any way that I think you would feel like happy with what we could deliver. But knowing, despite that like your delegation works really hard together, and you know, we view having more representatives of a town actually as better opportunities, because maybe one of our caucuses can be more effective than the other at getting something across the finish line. So,
all right, point taken.
Yeah, optimism.
But since you brought up the prisons and the downsizing, it's another thing you can look at. Enfield Correctional has been empty now for almost 2 years. And there's other prisons that have closed on the opposite end of the state. Maybe the issue with Solent North could be as simple as moving out that operation to Enfield Correctional and Enfield, and free up that other, that might be something that we could use here in East Windsor. the Solent North. So there's a lot of opportunities to move that one entity out of there into another state property that's well maintained. So I just throw that out for food for thought.
Sarah.
Hi, I'd like to thank you both for being here and also thank you to Representative Hall for all that she does for us. It sounds like your priorities are really in line with what our community needs at this time. A lot of what I had written down was already discussed. I was glad to see that Representative Foster is working on a public safety bill. I'd like to hear more about that at some point. Just because I think we really need to stop the repetitive behavior of juveniles committing the same crimes over and over again, because an arrest is pointless without any consequences. Also, I think the legislature made really great strides with domestic violence last session, passing Jennifer's Law. So I'm in favor of anything that can provide resources to victims or anything that helps with restraining orders and protection of the victim. And also, if a vote came up to extend the governor's executive powers again, I would hope you'd consider opposing that. I think it's time that the legislature has a voice again. The special ed funding that Jason talked about, that's something I've been in favor of for years, but thank you to Senator Anwar for kind of explaining how there can be cons to that as well. And I think everything else has been touched on in the discussion, so thank you.
Sarah, thank you for your advocacy in the domestic violence arena. I hadn't prior to the session had a lot of advocacy experience in that space, but less than a week before that bill was debated on the House floor, a friend of mine who I had worked with for several years was murdered by her spouse. And so that bill was like an experience and a debate that I really never want to go back to again in debating. It was really painful. It was painful to hear people like try and change components of the bill that I knew were really meaningful to the health, safety, and well-being of women in our community or people in our community. But it was really important legislation to see passed. And thank you for your work, your longtime work in that space, because it's really important. And then I'm happy to talk about the public safety components. Recently, there's like 2 proposals circulating around out there. And what I've done recently is either solicited a meeting or met with the police departments in both towns to ask about which legislative package meets their needs. And I've been sort of like looking at things in item, each component separately, not like this is who's proposing this and who's proposing this, which one of these components makes the most sense. I've been sort of like feel free to nitpick and like I want to know like I'm item by item what makes the most sense. Policing is not my expertise, obviously. And what has been interesting in those conversations is there are things that are in place right now that should be working differently. And having those conversations with our local law enforcement agencies have been really illuminating. There is a sentiment that even if the law allows them to do things that will like detain a juvenile who has been a repeat offender, it requires them to ask the courts for detention. There's the sentiment that there's no reason to try. And there's this counter argument from the court system saying, well, we've not rejected it, so I don't know why they're saying they're not going to try. But regardless of where and why that came from, that is a real and existing problem that has meaningful consequences in our community. And so I've been trying really eagerly to seek feedback from our police departments on what they think about the proposals as they stand right now. And there is a lot of concurrence in the proposals. So I do feel confident that things are going to move forward this session. And what I'm hoping is that we can continue to have a dialogue like in this conversation between law enforcement and the judicial system to make sure that where there is that sentiment that they're not like, you know, like that they're passing people on and they're not getting real consequences, and then the courts have the ability to leverage consequences, that we can address that, because that's challenged to address legislatively, but I think we've illuminated a lot in these conversations. And so a lot of my colleagues from around the state have been having these bipartisan community conversations, including stakeholders from all different places in the juvenile justice conversation. And what I will say is East Windsor is really a shining star in this example of how they are handling policing, community policing, in a way that, like, I think a lot of the things that other towns are saying, this might also help, and this is something the municipality could do or the local police department can do. And I'm hearing those conversations and I'm like, well, East Windsor's definitely already doing that. Like, every time one of those community conversations comes up about what a local police department could be doing, it is consistently, all right, well, but what if we're already doing that? So then what next? And so a couple of things. One, the social work model, I think, is really a shining star in the state. And I think, you know, we've talked about a couple of things that East Windsor's doing that towns are emulating, like the Erase Grant, but the social work program in our police department is really important and, you know, deserves emulation. But also the really transparent data platform is really important for people to understand where action is needed in each local community. So like, if we enacted a law, would that be meaningfully impactful to the town based on what they're seeing in the police force? And so I think that's really helpful. And East Windsor sort of like light years beyond where we're moving. So kudos to the police force, because they make a lot of this work a lot easier in the advocacy. And if you have ideas or suggestions, I'm happy to hear it. And if you have ideas about what comes next in domestic violence, please reach out, because I'd like to do more there, even though I've never want to debate that topic and hear people try and argue against it ever again. That took like a lot from me, but yeah, I'm happy to work with you if there's any way that we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'll make very short comments. I know it's very late for everyone. So I was honored to be a co-sponsor and work closely with Senator Kasser, who actually was the architect of the actual coercive control part of the bill, which is actually the best bill in the entire country. The rest of the country is looking at our domestic violence bill to see if they can emulate something like that. So we are thankfully way ahead of the rest of the country right now. The other thing is that we need multi-pronged approach. We cannot arrest our way out of the solution. There's going to be another approach, is to look at the catalytic converters, because people are buying them. That should be illegal as well. There's an opportunity to look at this. So we'll be working on that end as well to try and look at it. And I think our police departments have done a phenomenal job to educate us. And I think that's where we have to look at. So thank you so much.
Anybody else? Charlie.
Yeah, Jay, I'll try and be quick. So to touch on the crime, I want to thank you guys both for, been great advocates for us and the town and the people within. But yeah, on the crime issue, I agree with what Sarah said. We really need to look at that, and to touch on what you said, Jamie, yeah, we have a great system here in East Windsor, but I think the deterrent towards new police officers has become so bad that it's now difficult to even get police officers into town so that we can implement that system of having a social worker going out there and doing social work as a police officer, because we don't have enough staff to actually implement that program. So, that's, I think, one part that may be needed to be addressed in order to implement that program statewide. We need to get police officers enticed to become police officer, or people to entice to become police officers. There's no, people are really turned off by the idea of becoming a police officer, I think, in this day and age, seeing what's going on as far as lawmaking and, what happens within the judicial system. Touching on that again, as far as Solnit North, I literally live next door to Solnit North. So I can tell you things over there are greatly improved over the way they were 10 years ago. I used to have kids running through my yard with 2 or 3 other people chasing after them. That doesn't happen anymore. But as far as facilities go, the state has tons of empty facilities like Marie touched on. We have Enfield, there's an empty facility there. There's the juvenile correctional location in the middle of the state that's currently empty. So I think, they should be looking at better ways to use these empty buildings and state properties, whether it's to deter crime, whether it's to house, kids that are in Solnit North, and whether it would help East Windsor as central municipal location. It could all be looked at. On the special ed, I know we've touched on this many times. My wife's a special ed teacher in Simsbury, so she sees a lot of this. The funding is a very difficult piece for every town to deal with. Even a town like Simsbury, they struggle with it. They lose students, they get students, and then if you become a town with a reputation of actually being able to handle students of special needs, you become a magnet for it. And Simsbury had a huge problem with this. They were actually like on chat threads online. Go to Simsbury, Connecticut. They have the best special ed program. And they were getting an influx of special needs students, which, put a real strain on their budget. Luckily, being a town like Simsbury with, a huge populace and a good tax base, they could deal with it a little better, but it still put a huge burden on their Board of Education system. So I think that needs to be looked at, whether it's, the state, does a pool and they just decide, okay, every kid with an IEP, they're state funded, through the education system, but they still maintain an inclusion program within that town that they live. Maybe that's what happens. And then I would also echo Alan's look on solar. There's a lot of stipulations with solar companies about, the actual structure that solar is put on. I had a denial for solar panels on a home that I own because it was too old. It didn't have a secure foundation, and the way it was structured with rafters, they decided that it wasn't suitable to hold the weight of solar panels, even though the house had been standing for 200 years and had withstood who knows how many blizzards and everything else. But nonetheless, I was denied solar panels on that home. So yeah, incentivizing, ground units and ground arrays and things like that, I think would help that program. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Jamie, did you want to throw in one more point on police recruiting and follow up to Charlie's point?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not on my concise game tonight. So I will try to be concise, but this is something that I have talked about actually more extensively with the Ellington resident state troopers. And there is a sentiment amongst them that there are many troopers heading for this great retirement wave that's coming and super concerning, that would work more years if they were able. Interestingly, according to the sergeant in Ellington, one of those heading for the retirement is actually responsible for car break-ins, is like their primary investigative role and priority. And so he's encouraging my advocacy on ensuring that folks who want to stay beyond retirement can be incentivized to do that in a way that is worthwhile for both the officer and the state. That's a union contract negotiation. So that's something I can advocate for, but not legislate. But I'm open to, if there are suggestions for things that we can be legislating, I'm happy to do that. But this is a place where I feel like facilitating conversations and elevating people's voices to do advocacy is helpful. And so that's what I've been trying to do, is where possible parlay introductions for people who I think are better spokespeople for issues that they understand better than me. And so I'm trying to sort of do that when possible, but trying to be concise. I know it's late, I'm sorry.
No, I understand that point. And, but again, I think the bigger, I mean, yeah, early retirement is obviously an issue, but I think the bigger problem is getting new recruits from the start. And that's where we really are going to fall short. And I think we're going to really see it in the next couple of years when these retirees do phase out and we've got no one to replace them.
Well, I want to thank both Senator Anwar and Representative Foster for being so generous with your time. Again, I know Representative Hall would have been here, but for a family obligation. I'm grateful for the three of you and the work that you do in the legislature, and the opportunity that you provide us to have, some comment on the work that you guys are doing. You guys are only a phone call away, always, and that's not lost on any of us, and we really appreciate it. So I guess we'll be in touch as the session rolls along.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for all the work you guys are doing. And we are just your partners at the state level to make sure that the quality of life of our citizens in East Windsor are protected as well. And we are all on the same team. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
It's so good to see you all. I hope everyone continues to stay healthy, and don't forget to reach out if you have suggestions or feedback. I'm here.
Sounds great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
With that, I think we go on to Selectmen's reports, and then we are going to have an executive session tonight, so hang in there. So my report tonight is going to be brief. On January 8th, the town was able to offer at-home test kits for distribution to town residents. This was the second time that we had been able to do that. Our supply was about 1/4 of what it had been the week prior, but we were still able to get more than 700 kits into the community. We have requested more test kits from the state, but no word yet on whether or not our request will be fulfilled. While we are waiting to see if we will have more allotted to us, I did want to share that there is now an opportunity for people to request at-home kits be delivered to their homes by going to www.covidtests.gov. Over the last 3 weeks, we've been able to offer drive-through PCR testing to town residents as well, which was especially important after the holidays and in the worst part of the Omicron wave. The first week, we tested more than 110 people. The second week, a little less than 80 people. And this week, we tested about 37 people. We've also made tens of thousands of N95 masks provided by the state available to residents in East Windsor over the last several weeks. Those will continue to be available at Town Hall and at the Town Hall Annex Mondays through Thursdays from 12:30 to 4:30 and Saturdays from 10 to 3 at the Warehouse Point Library. Over the last few weeks, I've spent a lot of time working on my FY 22-23 budget proposal. It isn't quite finished yet, but I will be in a position where I can present it to you on February 3rd. At that point, we'll have some work to do before we transmit that budget to the Board of Finance in March. Of note, and Al might talk about this later on, so I'll just glaze over it. The Planning and Zoning Commission has continued its public hearing concerning cannabis regulations. The hearing is likely to close next week, so the public still has an opportunity to weigh in. Eversource has notified the town that they will shortly commence their tree trimming activities in town for this year. They will be trimming along more than 47 miles of road in town this year, which is a little more than half of what we have. This ongoing maintenance is intended to mitigate widespread outages during severe weather events. Asplund will be doing the work for Eversource, and that again is expected to start in the next couple of weeks. Finally, the town is looking for summer help in the Park and Rec Department. If you or someone you know would like to be a camp counselor, a lifeguard, or a summer program assistant, Applications are available in my office and in the community services office. Starting pay this year will be $14 an hour. That is all I have. I would recognize Marie. Marie, you're muted.
Sorry. Mine's short also. Attended the East Windsor Police Commission meeting held via Zoom on January 12th. Police Chief Ed DeMarco discussed the effects that COVID-19 has had on the agency. Not only has our officers and staff fallen ill to COVID-19, but those not affected are being ordered to cover shifts. This will have a great impact on the overtime budget going forward. The radio RFP report has been completed and forwarded. The draft copy has been completed and forwarded to the appropriate team members to review. Chief DeMarco has taken over the retired police chief in Suffield that managed the mental health grant for the towns of Suffield, East Windsor, Windsor Locks, and East Granby. He volunteered to handle the program, or he felt it's vital for the future needs of these towns. They're pending a $42,000 grant for traffic enforcement devices. They haven't quite decided yet if they're going to get a vehicle or do some other things, but the money is forthcoming. They received a DUI grant along with a $12,000 private grant to increase enforcement at the roadway inn. And then the January 19th meeting for the Housing Authority was canceled. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Marie. Al.
And then I'll be able to keep it short because of Jason's help.
Sorry.
No, it's great. I'm totally fine with it. And I'll just repeat, the cannabis public hearing is open for one more meeting. Want to make sure anybody that wants to have a say in that, go ahead and have their say. As you heard, South Road is moving along. That's great. So that's all I'll say about that. And I'll save the bulk of my comments for the pension meeting. We met on Tuesday for the quarterly pension meeting, and we got a report on how the pension is going, how it did for 2021. So basically, we made 15%, which was amazing. Of course, it was a great year in the stock market, and we have a well-managed fund by, I think, pretty competent managers. They took us out of some of our international exposure that was, sure to lose, and it ended up paying off. So really looking good there. The other piece that we did discuss as a group, we got the actuarial valuation from the actuaries, which gives us a snapshot of where things are from their viewpoint. And if you remember the last couple of years, we decreased our interest rate assumption, which increased our contribution, but that also because of the longevity tables that changed, it created a smaller funded ratio for the pension. I just want to report that since last year we've gone from 80 to 85% funded, which is really good. And the contribution that the town will have to make is slightly smaller this year than it was last year. So things are looking really, really solid, really stable there. And I think going forward, we'll be pretty happy with where we're going to be. And that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Sarah.
Okay, the Parks and Recreation Commission, Arts and Culture Commission, and Veterans Commission all canceled their meetings. I did attend the Planning and Zoning and Police Commission meetings, which were previously reported on. The Board of Education met on January 12th. The board received an update from Broadbrook Elementary School Principal Laura Fox and Assistant Principal Matthew Ryan on the iReady Personalized Learning and Teacher Toolbox, which provides resources for all teachers. They explained how it aligns with the East Windsor Public Schools strategic plan. It helps students learn perseverance, supplements curriculum, and teaches problem-solving skills. The board unanimously voted to appoint Betsy Laborious as a member of the Board of Education to fill the vacancy left by William Raber. The school district is working on reorganizing their business office and have hired an interim business manager. And Dr. Tudrin has been communicating with all stakeholders in this transition. This topic was discussed more at length in last night's Board of Finance meeting, which Selectman Nordell will discuss. Superintendent Dr. Patrick Tudrin gave the board a re-entry update. The CDC has updated guidelines to 5 days for a student needing to quarantine due to COVID-19. Contact tracing is now optional for school districts. East Windsor schools are continuing to do contact tracing at this time, but that could change based on the nurses' availability and ability to perform other systematic duties. The school district did receive COVID-19 test kits from the state, and they're prioritizing who will receive them with the goal of keeping schools open in mind. The school district has had several sports game cancellations due to positive cases of COVID-19. Due to CIAC guidelines, spectators are only home fans at this time, and they must sit 3 feet apart unless from the same household. The board and superintendent were reviewing the 2022-2023 school calendar and decided to table this to a future meeting to gather more feedback from other school districts as to when they will be holding their April vacations before finalizing. I think it is important to note that the board and superintendent were taking into consideration public participation that was received from parents on this agenda item. It was also mentioned that kindergarten students are now required to be in school for 180 days, so they will no longer be starting later than the other grades. And lastly, East Windsor Parks and Recreation is collecting handmade Valentine's Day cards to distribute to residents at Fresh River, touch points at Chestnut, and senior housing within town. Cards can be dropped off at the Town Hall Annex during normal business hours through February 9th. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Charlie?
Yes. All right. On January 13th, I attended the PTO meeting. Fall fundraisers managed to collect $6,083 and some change between the 2 fall fundraisers that they held. They discussed upcoming fundraiser ideas and plans, mostly for the spring because they want to try and make it easier to work around COVID and try to plan some outdoor events that they think would get better attended if we didn't have to deal with indoors and masks and COVID and all that sort. So pretty much things are going to be on hold until the spring months for them. On January 19th, I attended the Board of Finance meeting. The Board of Finance approved forwarding the approval of the purchase of a new fire truck for Broadbrook Fire Department to be sent to a town meeting, which we had tonight, which unanimously passed. That fire truck will be in the amount of $1,049,658. It was reported that taxes are 72% collected at this point, which is up from the last 2 years. The town audit is still not 100% complete, but is projected to be done on time. The Board of Ed has reported the current school year's budget is in good shape, and that next year's school budget presentation is being worked on. And the Board of Finance also approved the transfer of funds to purchase a budget transparency software package, which allows you to take a budget and compare it to past years or look deeper into specifics of the budget. It is very detailed and allows taxpayers to examine the budget in detail and how it relates to their own tax bill. This came with a price tag of $18,600 for a 2-year contract, which looked very interesting. I was very excited to see that. I guess I missed that original presentation because I was absent from that Board of Selectmen's meeting. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Charlie. Public participation. This is the public's second opportunity to address the board. If you'd like to speak, please unmute yourself, give your name and your address, and state your business. Seeing none, we will go into executive session, subject to 1-206B and 6E.
Selectman Nordell will move that we go into executive session at 9:40 PM.
Second,
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We are in executive session at 9:40 PM. 10:08, with no further business to come before the Board of Selectmen, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
second,
Motion has been made and seconded. It's non-debatable. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned at 10:09 PM. Thank you, folks. Have a good evening.